welcome and aloha. I'm Mark Shklov, the host of ThinkTech Hawaii's Law Across the Sea program. Today we're going across the sea to talk with Elizabeth, Chien-Hale, and David I. Elizabeth is a patent attorney and partner in the international law firm of Appleton Luff. She is a University of Hawaii Law School graduate who began her career in Silicon Valley serving clients such as 3M, Palm, Adobe, and Applied Materials, and was Apple's Senior Patent Counsel China Coordinator. David is Head of Innovation at the London School of Economics and Political Science. Previously, he was Chief Innovation Officer at the University of Hawaii System and Chairman of the International Strategy Committee at the Association of University Technology Managers. Elizabeth and David are two of the authors of Commercialization of IP Rights in China, a book that has just been published by the American Bar Association. I've asked Elizabeth and David to discuss President Trump's recent executive orders directed at TikTok and WeChat, media applications owned by Chinese companies. As everyone knows, TikTok is a video sharing application and WeChat is a messaging application. Elizabeth and David, welcome. Good to see you in these interesting times. As you know, on August 6, 2020, President Trump signed two executive orders, one directed at TikTok and one directed at WeChat. Please tell us, what were those executive orders all about? What's the message that President Trump is sending to TikTok and WeChat? Elizabeth, first, please.
Okay, yes. This is part, in my opinion, I've been observing this U.S.-China trade dispute for the past 2 years now, starting with forcing IP legislative changes all the way now to using the executive order to stop a streaming or chatting application. And it's been a progression, and that combines with the State Department's announcement about clean cloud, clean app, clean network. So I see this as a progression of actions directed at in response to China's rise and also to China's past pattern, much reported pattern of IP theft and disrespect for intellectual property laws. And that's a very broad background. And I should add that President Trump added another executive order on August 14 directed at TikTok, forcing, which in my opinion is on firmer legal grounding based on CFIUS authority to review merging acquisition of American business, which is defined very broadly as any business not American-owned, not American incorporated, but any company that does American interstate commerce. So it's adding another complementary and perhaps more damaging order to force the divestiture of TikTok.
David, what do the executive orders provide? What do TikTok and WeChat have to do under these executive orders?
Yeah, I'd also like to add a little bit more backdrop. Let's look at these executive orders from a longer planning horizon or timing horizon. You probably recall that earlier, ZTE and Huawei have already been sanctioned by the U.S. government very strongly. ZTE almost went under, and Huawei is still struggling. And as of just the last a couple of days, there was also a new executive order saying that the basically stopping any extension of the ban for American companies to supply software or software updates to Huawei. And that would essentially make it impossible for Huawei to continue selling its cell phones, which is very popular. Huawei is either number one or number two in the world in terms of the cell phone shipment in the last few quarters. So Huawei will not be able to get Apple iOS updates or get it installed in the factory before they ship those cell phones. And similarly, Android operating system will not be able to get installed into Huawei cell phones. So this would effectively affect most of Huawei's cell phone business, which is a huge impact. So with these two companies, ZTE and Huawei, already squarely in the crosshair, you also recall that earlier, the Commerce Department published the entity list, banning U.S. businesses from doing business with companies on the entity list. This includes things like SenseTime, which is a $7 billion valuation company in facial recognition technology, such as Hikvision, HIK Vision. Hikvision is a $7 billion a year business in monitoring or surveillance equipment business worldwide, such as iFlightTech, which is another leading vendor in the voice recognition. So all of these have to do, these companies, and most of the companies on the entity list have to do with how they capture data, how they capture especially identity-related data, and thereby causing the U.S. government to suspect that if they work with the Chinese government, which under the law in China, they will have to, when requested, they will actually transfer very sensitive identity information to the Chinese government to help with the surveillance. And now we're looking at this clean network and clean this and clean that. So this is not anything new. This is actually a continuation of the current administration. And I believe that what we're headed is actually a segregated digital world. They actually wanted to segregate the U.S. from the Chinese government's long arm in their ability to capture, analyze, and utilize the data that they collect through these commercial companies to either constrain speech or to apply pressure on the individuals who actually have spoken incorrectly. And perhaps even there's concern about espionage potential, meaning any people who have sensitive data in the hands of Chinese government might be vulnerable to their blackmailing and might be more easily compromised from a counter intelligence perspective. So all of those are just a overall trend.
Let me ask Elizabeth then, going back and asking about the background. I mean, are these real or just alleged threats by TikTok and WeChat? Is that what we're talking about? And what is this clean network? What is that about?
Yeah, well, clean work meaning to protect Americans from foreign intrusions, malicious intrusions, to steal our personal data, to steal companies' technologies. And actually, if you go to the State Department's website, in that declaration, they named the Chinese Communist Party by name. So it's not just some vague malicious player. They actually mention Chinese Communist Party as a malicious actor. So it is kind of targeting China. I think what's interesting as intellectual property attorney who's followed this through the years, and going from the days when we're fighting Chinese counterfeits to the days when we're fighting Chinese infringers, copycats, and now we're talking about the protection of sensitive data. And we're actually expanding these national power, IEEP and CFIUS, which these executive orders are based on. They have always existed, but they were mostly used to protect military secrets, defense-related technologies, or protecting foreign acquisition of real estate that's close to an airport, a military base. But now they're being interpreted so much more broadly to protect data. And but in a way, it is a trend in intellectual property law. We have gone from the days of anti-counterfeiting, infringement, to the days where we're really talking about privacy and personal data protection. And we've seen these issues raised against U.S. companies, Facebook being the most recent. But of course, Facebook got off pretty easily, and there are a few leaks by others. Everybody got off pretty easily. But this TikTok, especially by these two complementary executive orders, are basically over in the United States, unless they sell to an American company. Even then, they have to certify that they have divested from all the previous technologies, and they will destroy all the data they collected. I don't know how that could be done within the 45 in one executive order and 90 in the other order. Even if these deadlines are extended, we're talking about an acquisition that was made in 2017. And the interesting thing, that 2017 acquisition was a Cayman Island company started by a Chinese entrepreneur. It happened to do very well in the United States. But, again, these statutes are useful, but they're a good legal ground, especially the CFIUS. I think it's hard to argue against the government's power to scrutinize foreign acquisition of American business, except, as we can tell, the business is being broadened to such a step that we are talking about a Cayman Island company by a Chinese entrepreneur, which happens to be doing business in the United States.
Basically what I hear you folks saying is that there was this threat to use information that is gathered through the use of these two applications, and the president said, "Hey, you got to stop doing it. Is that it? And not allow these companies to do business anymore in the United States?" I mean, is that right? Is that what's going to, is that the end result? That's what I hear you telling me.
Yeah. Yes, I think you are saying it correctly. This is where I said that the intention seems to be to create a segregated, or what you would call the parallel universe between the U.S. and China.
Wow. And that means that, there's lots of Chinese that come to the United States, and that means they won't. Would that mean they could not use WeChat, for example, in the United States?
Well,
that is a big problem. Go ahead.
Yeah, the WeChat is in better situation than TikTok. I think TikTok would be very difficult to do anything in the United States under these two complementary executive orders. I think WeChat might still have a little wiggle room because the transaction has not been defined so far. The Secretary of Commerce is supposed to define that within 45 days. We have some precedents to go on, so it's probably going to cover all transactions. But I think WeChat might still have a little wiggle room. Maybe we can still use that. If we already have it on our phone, we can use that to chat. But maybe one can no longer transfer money to China or have Chinese transfer money to use the WeChat. Maybe what's really bad for WeChat will be the commercial aspect rather than the chatty functions.
Okay, and we're going to take a short break right now, and when I come back, I want you to expound, both of you, on the consequences, where you see this going for both of those. And we talked a little bit about it, but I'd like to go a little bit deeper and see where, what the future holds. So we'll take a 1-minute break now. We'll be back and look into the future, I hope.
Aloha, I'm Christine Linders, a physical therapy specialist and the host of Movement Matters. My show is designed to teach you the simplest and most effective treatment strategies to get you out of pain and back to doing what you love. If you or someone you know is having pain in a certain area of the body and would like a free assessment in treatment over media or in person, and then come on the show to talk about it, email us at thinktechmovementmatters@gmail.com. Or if you have a topic you would like to know more about, please email us. My goal is to decrease pain all over the world, inspiring people to take better care of their bodies to enjoy life to the fullest. I look forward to hearing from you.
Welcome back. I'm Mark Shklov, host of ThinkTech Hawaii's Law Across the Sea program, and today we are talking with Elizabeth Chien-Hale and David I about WeChat and TikTok and President Trump's recent executive orders. I mean, and David and Elizabeth, these are, I mean, big topics, and we're just doing an introduction here. But what do you see as the future? I mean, where are we going with these executive orders? What will be the possible consequences? What transactions are covered for WeChat and TikTok and cell phone makers, app stores, American businesses, Chinese users? Where do you see it going? David, you please.
Sure. Earlier we talked about the potential consequences to these two companies, and for TikTok, it might be a little bit easier and cleaner for it to sever its businesses between the U.S. and China. After all, most of the users on either side of the ocean. Most of the users are really building their social network domestically, so there's not that much cross-Pacific traffic, if you will. And therefore, if they did successfully sell the U.S. operation as Trump administration suggested to Microsoft, then that could quite viably exist separately from their Chinese operation. So there might be a parallel universe, but their users will not be quite as much impacted. And by the way, TikTok, if you want to know how big it is, 3 years ago they had 20 million users, and now they have more than 600 million users. 3 years. Growing from 20 million to 600 million. So that gives you a sense of how big it is just in the US. And now we go to WeChat. WeChat is a much more complicated story. It is a conglomerate. It's not just a one single messaging platform. It's a payment system. It is the foundation of so many businesses, large and small, including a lot of businesses in the US. For example, in the US, we have about 5 million Chinese or Chinese Americans living in the US, 5 million. However, the daily traffic shows there are 19 million active users on WeChat in the US. So it's actually about 3/4 are non-Chinese. For instance, myself, I maintain a very active WeChat communications channel with my friends and family and business contacts in China on a daily basis. I spend probably more than an hour on WeChat not just casual chatting, but a lot of times it's video conferencing, much like a Zoom here, is free and it's actually very reliable. So people use it for daily communications all the time. And all the small businesses that conduct import export businesses with China, they almost all rely on WeChat. It's also a very effective advertising platform, as well as a delivery platform, as well as customer service platform. So how do you really carve it out and decide to sever it in the middle of the Pacific, saying that here you do that part and I do this part. And by the way, you cannot really allow, there isn't any effective mechanism that I can think of where you could say that you cannot censor political sensitive information for people, users in the US, but when they're actually communicating to users in China, Chinese government absolutely will not allow that. So how do you do that, even in the parallel universe, if you have so many connecting points, it will get very, very messy.
Well, let me ask Elizabeth, to chat about that also, and also as a practicing lawyer, Elizabeth, I mean, if I'm sitting in front of you as a client with a company like TikTok or WeChat, and I'm facing these type of orders, what advice would you give me to resolve these problems? But anyway, please talk, chime in.
TikTok has already announced that it is going to file lawsuits. We have yet to see it being filed, but there are constitutional grounds, at the very least First Amendment grounds, to challenge the first executive order, the one that's based on the 40-day restriction. But I think it will probably have a much harder time challenging the second one based on CFIUS, because, like I said, it seems much more solid grounds. The CFIUS, the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States, does have the statutory authority to review things, and it does have authority to ask the buying party, in this case ByteDance, to divest. So maybe selling TikTok is the best option for TikTok at this point. I mean, I certainly will encourage them to stall through a lawsuit. I don't know if it's going to bring positive results. We don't know. And again, you have to see these two things separately. For TikTok, purely from American corporate perspective, I can see the divestiture of ByteDance from Musical.ly and the destroying of the TikTok application and this very innovative market it created. The short videos. We have not seen this before, aided by AI, and a lot of teenagers enjoy that. So they created this small market, which they have to kind of give it up to probably Facebook. I can see that's going to benefit American business. But WeChat, I think, is a different story. Like David already said, WeChat is so much part of the Chinese economy. I think most U.S. consumers probably use WeChat on a recreational basis. Maybe small businesses use that for business with China. But I don't think Americans, for the most part, understand how ubiquitous WeChat is in the Chinese economy. And I think the U.S., let's talk about Apple. If the Apple's App Store is forced to not to have WeChat in its store, not to facilitate the transactions, I think Apple phone sales will take a hit, very much like Huawei phone sales is taking a big hit right now because it's not allowed to use an Android system. It cannot do a lot of things it used to do. I mean, the phones are usually as useful as their app. And sure, I mean, their internal hardware and how quickly their iOS operates builds to, but really it's the App Store that's, I think, a big foundation of the ecosystem of cell phone. And therefore, I do not see this ban on WeChat is going to benefit U.S. business that much. I mean, for one thing, I think these Android phones and Apple phones will have to take a hit in sales. I am already beginning to see Huawei developing its own operating system. I think the next step is going to develop its own app stores. And there may have some unique app stores which will not go on to an iPhone store and an Android store. And again, these will kind of undermine the sales of these phones, at least in China, if not elsewhere.
Let me ask you both in closing. I mean, we have a couple minutes left here. Does the president have the authority to do these type of things, to order these media social apps to start working, stop working in a land of the free and where we value speech, free speech? Well, David, first you, and then Elizabeth. What are your thoughts on this? And what are your feelings?
It looks like the Trump administration does have the legal authority under the IEEPA Act, that is International Emergency Economic Powers Act of 1977, authorizing the U.S. administration, the executive branch, to actually selectively target any foreign businesses when it comes to anything threatening national security. And typically, the judicial branch would give enough deference to the executive branch as long as it has reasonable foundation, reasonable basis for such executive power. So on the basis of that, I think it will be rather hard to challenge the fundamental legal basis. But of course, there are constitutional grounds such as the taking clause. You shall not take any U.S. person's property without proper compensation. There's a due process clause arguing that the Trump administration has not really gone through the typical administration procedure in 45 days or even 90 days. It's just unreasonable. So those are all possibilities.
Okay, and Elizabeth, I think you've already kind of weighed in on this, but so what would you conclude? What are your conclusions to all of this? And let's acknowledge we're just beginning this discussion. This is the start of where we're going, and we're just trying to get some idea. What are your conclusions in about the minute we have left?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like this is in a way testimony that Chinese companies have arrived in a way in terms of their innovative power. It's to the point where it's now beginning to threaten the United States. In the earlier days, we see China taking these unilateral actions against Google, against Facebook, because the government felt threatened. Unfortunately, I believe our government is beginning to show similar tendencies. I'm very sorry we're not walking the moral high ground. I think at least one of the executive orders is violated on constitutional grounds. And I'm also sorry that our government is not upholding our usual stance of kind of commitment to progress and innovation without national, international borders. Here is a case where we think we might kill TikTok, which is, like I mentioned, a very innovative company, and that is truly too bad. And to wrap up into our book on IP, I think the rise of Chinese technology companies is what prompted us to write about commercialization of intellectual property in China. I think as the IP standards rises in China, Americans stand to gain also. They can sell their IP, they can license IP, they might acquire interesting IP, like with TikTok. I have so much hope that, if Microsoft were to buy TikTok was under commercial terms rather than under executive order from the U.S. government.
Well, I want to thank you both for beginning this conversation, and we got 45 days at least to see where we're going on the executive orders. So Elizabeth Chien-Hale and David mahalo. Appreciate your knowledge and expertise, and we'll look forward to see where we go with WeChat and TikTok in the future. Aloha.
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 Thank you.